All right, hi everyone. My name is Andy Stewart. I did my MSc in the Organizational and Social Psychology program. My advisor was Dr. Ben Chenoy, who was wonderful, absolutely lovely to work with. And then my study was called The Trolley Problem and Me, the study of identity and its effects on moral decision making. Now, the idea for this study kind of came to me from the most recent presidential election in the United States. Being an American, as you can tell by my accent, it was something that kind of intrigued me. I am from Oklahoma, which was actually the most Republican state in the nation as well. So growing up in a place that was surrounded by all sorts of people who voted for Trump, I was not necessarily inspired to study them because they voted for Trump, but because of a distinction that I saw in their behavior and their ideas. So for the election, some 80% of evangelical Christians voted for Donald Trump. Now, many of these people embody traits of Southern hospitality, kindness, generosity, empathy in their individual behavior. But whenever it comes to some of these more group contexts, I noticed this difference in what they say they believe and how they act whenever it comes to patriotic contexts. And this difference and this distinction kind of made me wonder, what are things that make us act one certain way in one situation and a different way in another situation, especially when they seem to be opposite or highly contradictory. Now, to study this, I used a famous philosophical problem called the trolley problem. Now, the trolley problem is rather simple, but it goes something like this. You're standing on a train platform and you see a trolley barreling down the tracks. Now, as you're standing on the platform, you look ahead and you notice 5 people tied to the rails. The trolley is going to run over these people, but next to you is this switch. And if you push this switch, it'll move the trolley to a different set of tracks where one person is tied to the tracks. So the problem is up to you. Do you allow the 5 people to die in order so that you don't kill the one person, or do you kill the one person to save 5 people? Now, this problem is used in philosophy and has been very informative for moral psychology, which is kind of the interest for me. Now, philosophy has 2 real schools of thought whenever it comes to the morality of actions. These are the main functioning ones that a lot of people use. So firstly is utilitarianism. The morality of an action is determined by its outcome. So in the trolley problem, utilitarians would always choose to save the 5 lives, regardless of the action, because you're saving 5 lives. It's pretty straightforward. The next one is deontology. Now, deontology says that the morality of an action is determined by following certain moral rules. We have an obligation or a duty to follow these rules. And so because of that, the morality of an action is determined by how well we follow these rules. One of the most common rules in deontology is, thou shalt not kill. Pretty straightforward. So a deontologist would always say, let the 5 people die. That way I don't kill someone and it's still acting moral. Now, for these philosophies, a lot of times we can think the things that we know and we can process through them rationally, but there seems to be this disconnect between what we can rationalize and cognitively think about and the way that we actually feel. And I believe that this disconnect affects the way we understand morality. Now, one of the big things in moral psychology that helps kind of further explain this is the idea of dual process theory. And the dual process theory comes from this famous kind of idea of 2 systems of mind, our fast thinking system and our slow thinking system. So the human mind uses both affect, which is fast processing, which is these emotions, these quick instinctive gut reactions that we have, and cognition, the slow processing to make sense of certain situations. Now, for me, one of the things that I think, and something that literature also shows that can force us to act differently in different situations, is identity. Identity can include many things, such as gender, which has been talked about today, race, nationality, religion, etc., etc. Now, whenever it comes to these different identities, the salience of the identity has been shown to affect the way people think, act, and behave. Now, the salience of these identities can be varied depending on different contexts. So there's this thing called the Sunday effect, where for Christians, on Sunday, they seem to act more Christian-like. In other situations, such as at a political rally, you might be inclined to more think of yourself and act in a more patriotic manner. So there are different things that affect us, both for our affective processes and our cognitive processes. Now, for my study, I looked at both religious and civic identities as they affect the morality and the moral decisions that we make most in depth. So, how does identity affect the way in which individuals make moral decisions? For my study, I only allowed American Christians to participate, and I used a 4x4 complex design. So, in my design, I had primes, which are methods of eliciting the salience of certain identities, and so I allowed people to either have no prime, just kind of a control, a Christian sin prime, which primed ideas of sin, judgment, and those sorts of tenets within Christianity, a Christian grace prime, which primed ideas of forgiveness, grace, mercy, and love, and then an American prime, which primed ideas of patriotism and kind of inspired people to think more about their nationality rather than any other thing. And then I used 4 different sets of the trolley problem. The basic one, then an inverse of the trolley problem where the one person is going to die, you don't have to do anything, and then 2 other versions of it using the child as the one person, so you have the choice between 5 lives or the life of a child, and then the inverse of that as well. The questions were quite simple, yes or no, do you save the 5 people? And then I asked people to rate their confidence in their decision and the level of moral conflict they felt within each decision. So, here's a whole bunch of numbers, but the most important one that I want to point out is the first one. TP stands for trolley problem. Now, for Christians who are primed with ideas of sin, judgment, only 66% of them said that they would save the 5 people, whereas in the Christian grace set, almost 85% of the people said that they would save the 5. Now, I thought that this was most interesting because these are opposing tenets within Christianity. These are literally opposites of the faith for Christians. And so I thought that this was one of the most interesting things because it was highly statistically significant. Now, what does this mean? How does this all kind of play out? So for the trolley problem, there's a lot of interesting things that people preferred to do, but whenever it comes to ideas of identity affecting moral decision-making, there seems to be this thing for deeply held identities and how they affect the way we make moral decisions. And so to me, I think that this is highly relevant, both in America, as there is a lot of political vitriol going on, there's a lot of turmoil, and political identities is very important to people in America. And so whenever it comes to identities that are deeply held within us and holds very important moral components as well, it seems to affect the way we make moral decisions in something. Now, there are a lot of limitations and complications with this study, as there was nothing super clear. There's no real causation. There's a lot of correlation. But one of the biggest things that it helps us understand is how these differing schools of philosophy, schools of thought within philosophy, affect the way we think, but don't necessarily always affect the way we feel whenever we're making moral decisions, which can often be the most important aspect or the most important component of how we make decisions in moral situations. So, that's my study. That was my dissertation. My email is in the thing if you would like to ask any more questions, and I'll be up here for the Q&A as well. So, thank you guys very much.